Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to be going over how to optimize your character in Solasta, and we're going to be going over some of the best ways to have the strongest character possible. So the first thing is Ancestry. We're not going to start with this, but this is the first thing that you are presented with when you're making a character. But I actually wouldn't start here. I would start with your class because your class is going to determine what race you want, essentially, at least most of the time. So the things to consider when you're making a class is that you want, well, I guess you got to take a broad view basically and decide how your party composition is going to look because most of the time you're going to want a balanced party. So having a balanced party means, you need front lines, you need support units, you need like a mix of range and melee essentially. Those are some of the things you want. You also want um, like variations in skills proficiencies. So you want someone that has good stealth or lock picking, for example. You probably want someone with good persuasion, intimidation, and deception. Like someone who's the face of the party. Um, but then you also want people who are really good at combat. So you want a mix of all those things. So that's something to keep in mind. Um, but basically, when you choose a class, you're choosing between like a tank, uh, between a support, between spellcasters, and then you're also considering, like I said, melee or ranged, like what you want to rely on the most. So, for the purposes of this video, we'll go with, I don't know, we'll just go with something simple like a fighter. And so the things to keep in mind is that each class has certain saving throw proficiencies. And if you don't know, saving throws are it's like a dice you roll to avoid harmful effects. And there's 6 types of them based on the 6 ability scores. Uh, yeah, so some classes have 2 saving throw proficiencies, or all of them have 2 saving throw proficiencies, as to say. And generally, it's in theme with their class, what those saving throws are. And then there's also armor proficiencies, which are important to keep in mind, weapon proficiencies. Sometimes there's crafting proficiencies. So in a fighter's case, you can craft ammunition with smith tools. And then each class also gets skill proficiencies that they could choose. And then there's other special abilities that classes get too. And then each class also gets equipment that they could choose. So you could actually edit this. You could choose and customize what equipment you have here. So if you didn't want a long sword, for example, you could switch over to a greatsword. Um, but yeah, that's an important thing to keep in mind. And it's important to keep in mind what proficiencies and skills you want from your class. And then, of course, the special abilities are important too, because that's going to determine how combat plays out. And then you also want to keep in mind the level up paths. You could actually view the level up paths here. Um, this will show you how your character progresses. Also, you get subclasses. So, you know, maybe there's something special you want for your class, or like a special specialization, I suppose, that you want. Uh, so, so you can keep that in mind too. And then another thing is that each class has hit dice, which is going to determine their hit points. So whenever they level up, this hit dice is going to be rolled, and then their Constitution modifier is going to be added to whoever's rolled, and that's going to be the amount of health they gain on the level up. So sometimes you're going to want higher hit dice, depending on the character you're making. Um, hit dice are good in general if you want to tank your character, because like some characters have higher hit dice. Like the Barbarian has the highest one with a D12, and then Wizard has the lowest with a D6. So hit dice are important for determining tankiness. And the last thing is to consider is healing. You're going to want characters that have healing in your party almost all the time. So if you want healers, you're going to want to consider classes like Druid, sometimes Paladin, um, Cleric. Obviously, Cleric's a big one. Um, and then Bard. Bard also has a little bit of healing. So it's good to have some healing in your party, um, or people that can heal other people in your party. And then we got the races. So the important thing about the races is that you get ability bonuses, or how can I say it? You get like additions to your ability scores based on what race you pick. So, if we're going to fighter here, we're going to want something like a half work because we get strength, which is our primary ability. We get +2 for that, and then we get +1 for con, which is probably the second most important thing for a fighter, right next to dexterity. Um, so when you're choosing a race, you want to keep those abilities in mind and which abilities are being buffed. But there's also other things like dark vision. If you're concerned about being able to see in the dark, you're going to want a character with dark vision. You also get extra skill proficiency sometimes, which can be nice. And then there's also special abilities sometimes which can synergize with certain classes. So in this case, half work is really good for fighter because we get stronger critical hits and we're not killed outright when we're reduced to 0 hit points for the first time. So things like that are important to keep in mind. Sometimes you also get languages from your ancestry. I don't place too much value in languages though. They don't come up too often in the game. And when they do, it's not super important. So I wouldn't place too much value on your languages. And then the last thing you might want to look at is move speed. Some classes, not classes, but some races have different movement speeds. So Halfling, for example, gets 5, Half Orc, and most of the others get 6. Um, and then the Sylvan Elf gets 7. So if you want a character with good movement speed, make sure you're looking at your ancestry for that. Sometimes races also get spells. So if you want extra spells, that's another thing you could look at. Also, damage resistances sometimes do appear. So for the Dragonborn, for example, you get damage resistance to your choice. Tieflings get fire damage resistance. So you can also get resistances from Ancestry. And along the same lines, you can get advantage on saving throws. So that can be nice if you're worried about getting affected by magic too much. And lastly, you could also get proficiency in tools sometimes from races. So there's a lot of things to consider when choosing a race, but basically you want it to synergize with your class. That's the main thing you want to keep in mind. And that starts with ability scores, like the ability scores that are being buffed. And then um, also the specials, the special abilities are something to keep in mind too. And then with backgrounds, uh, the main thing to consider is that you're getting more proficiencies and skills. So you're going to want to pick your background based on what skill proficiencies you want. You get languages sometimes, so like I said, those aren't too important. You can get proficiency with weapons or armor sometimes, which can be nice if you're a class that doesn't have those proficiencies. Um, and then you get starting equipment too for your background, which isn't too impactful, but it's something to note. And you also get background personality tags, um, which isn't super impactful for the gameplay, but for role playing purposes, it can be important if you want a certain background that has a certain personality. Um, there's also tool proficiencies from backgrounds, which could be important because going along the lines of a well balanced party, you're going to want a party that's well balanced in terms of the tools they could use. So keeping different backgrounds for that purposes is really nice. Like for example, the philosopher gets a herbalism kit, whereas the cultist gets a scroll kit, and the academic gets well, they're proficient in the Manaclon rosary. Um, so it would be good to have different backgrounds like those, just so you get the wide array of crafting proficiencies that you could use. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to craft, everything possible. And the last thing I would note is just to make sure you're not overlapping skill proficiencies with other proficiencies that you already have. So, for example, um, since we picked a half work, we already have proficiency in the intimidation skill. But you'll notice if we chose sellsword, it would give us intimidation again as a proficiency. So you want to make sure you don't overlap like that. So in this case, we wouldn't want sellsword probably. We'd want to choose something like I don't know, maybe wanderer, because it doesn't overlap with any of those previous proficiencies. And when choosing your ability scores, you basically want to always re-roll the dice here. You want to do the roll feature. Um, this is actually a pretty good one right off the bat. But basically, you can re-roll these as many times as you want. So you should always basically just do this if you want the best scores possible. Because you'll see you can get some pretty good ones. Like we can get 19 strength here off the bat. I'd actually probably do this. Yeah, so we can get two 18s off the bat, and then everything else is 10 or higher. So you can get really good ability scores just by re-rolling these a bunch, and it's pretty easy and simple. Doing the point buy is not as good as this because you can only get up to like 17, I think, max. Whereas with rolling like this, you can get up to 20 maximum right off the bat. So if you want to optimize character, you're going to want to do it this way for ability scores. And then you can choose skill proficiencies. I would choose these based off what your party needs. So if you have someone that's high in charisma, um, then you could, boost this side of their skill tree. But if you already have someone high charisma in your party, then you might want to look towards other skills like acrobatics, athletics, sleight of hand, stealth. It's good to just have a good balance in general. And when choosing your skill proficiencies, it's good to keep that in mind. There are like some skills that are more valuable than others too. Like I think insight and perception are really good. All of the charisma ones are pretty good too. Sleight of hand and stealth, obviously, you'll get a lot of use out of too. I think athletics too gets a lot of use in this game from like high jumps or long jumps, I should say. So that could be useful. Um, I don't know. There's like other decent ones too, but those are some of the best ones. So I would prioritize certain skills in that way. But it's good to have a good balance in your party of skills, like it is with most things. You want to have good balance in general with your party. And then sometimes you can choose languages, but like I said, these aren't too important. But yeah, that's it. Let me know if you have any other tips for character creation in the comments below. And thanks for watching.